Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of He's Not Wrong. I'm your host, Chad D. And man, oh man, do I have a treat for all of you today. This is my first episode where I will have a guest. And this guest, I am so honored to have on today. If you follow me on social media, you already know who it is. But for the sake of the podcast, I'm going to tease it a little bit. She is an amazing human. She's my best friend. She was Miss America 2013. The work that she's done for women empowerment, incredible. She was the 2018 Democratic congressional candidate for Alabama's 3rd District. She was the 2022 Democratic candidate for an Alabama State House seat up in her city of Huntsville, Alabama. And the work that she is doing locally is incredible. We all have something that we can learn from her, especially when we don't know exactly what each day holds at the national level for our federal government. So it's very important that we get involved locally. And she's on the board for the Rocket City Pride organization, and they have partnered with the city of Huntsville to provide resources and programs and critical needs to the LGBTQIA plus community up in Huntsville. She is the true definition of a leader and an ally. And I, for one, am so grateful for everything that she's doing. In today's episode, when we speak with her, we're going to talk about what we can be doing locally to get involved, why getting involved locally is so impactful. We're going to reminisce on the days where she ran for office in 2018 and when she inspired me to run for office for the Montgomery City Council the next year, and the lessons that we learned then and how they can be applied today. Not only is her resume impressive as the National Press Secretary for the Seneca Project, she's also my best friend. We have a history that goes back all the way to 2017. She took a chance on me when my self-doubt was absolutely at the highest level. I just moved to a new state after college. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know who I was. It was a time that was wrought with self-discovery. And she told me, come back home, work on my congressional campaign, do what you do professionally, but do it for me. She is one of the best bosses that I have ever had in my entire life. I love her dearly. And without further ado, let's get into it. I give you my best friend, my first guest, Mallory Hagan-Stramara. Mallory, hi, welcome to Snap. Welcome to He's Not Wrong. I think it is so fitting that you're my first guest on the new podcast for a multitude of reasons. The first one being, I think you, actually, I don't think I know, I'm not wrong about this one. You are the person I've said she's not wrong to the most in my life. And I have pitched She's Not Wrong to you the most out of anyone. Never was able to make it happen, but I think for good reasons, because you just released your new podcast, Pretty Furious, recently. I want to know the inspiration for that. I want to know where that came from and how that's going.
Yes. Well, you are the one person in my life consistently who has said you should absolutely have a podcast. And I think life has always felt like it was too much to handle, couldn't maintain the schedule of having a podcast. And, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to maintain guests and to get it all together and to schedule everything. But we just released Pretty Furious. It's myself and my friend Maggie Gelson Burnett. And essentially both of us are pretty furious about just the state of the world. And my favorite book is a book called Good and Mad by Rebecca Triester. And it's about how when women come together and channel their anger into action, the world changes. Like if you look at most movements across history, it's because finally women said, oh my God, and got together and pushed for change. And so Pretty Furious is a marriage of I've Had It, if you love that podcast, and We Can Do Hard Things. Those are two of my favorite podcasts. And so our hope was to sort of marry those two concepts. It's fun. We talk about headlines. We talk about beauty products because you can't be pretty furious without first being pretty. But we also talk about really deep and important topics. And our hope is that whoever is listening, all the girls, gays, and theys, walk away with something that helps them, whether that's politically or in their personal life. And so we're really excited about it. We also just launched Just Like You, and we can't wait to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited. One reason why I wanted you to come on as my first guest, not only because I think it's fitting, but because you inspired me to run for office. And a lot of feedback that I got in the first episode is when I slid in that I ran for office. Not a lot of people knew about that. And I wanted to reminisce on those days of 2018 and 2019 with you and talk about what we've learned from that experience that can be applied to our current times, because it's scary, and I think it's really important now more than ever that we get involved locally.
Well, I think you and I both know we learned a lot in 2018. It was both of our first real foray into politics. You were involved in like a state legislature situation in high school and maintained that in college, but I really didn't. And 2018 was my first foray into politics, and I was 29 years old. What I learned is that first and foremost, politics is and should be for everyone. As long as you meet the age requirement and, the housing requirement to run for office, you have a space in politics. And we really need to take advantage of that. So I would say that was my main thing. We really wanted to, with our campaign, and I say we meaning and you, wanted to encourage other people to pick up the gavel and run for office, or pick up the torch and run for office. And so I'm really proud that we did that. I'm proud that you ran for office, but so many other people contacted me across the country and were like, I saw that you ran, so I'm running for school board or I'm running for city council. And ultimately, that was the goal. I think one of the major lessons that I took away from running in 2018, and I think you would agree with me, is that there is a lot of ego in politics, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Everybody is gunning for what little slice of power they have and what little community they have. And so it can make it very difficult to get things done. So I would say find an organization or a group of people that actually are doing the work, that are not just having meetings talking about the work that needs to get done or pontificating about how messaging should be different or who should do what differently, and that are actually putting the pedal to the metal and getting out and making a difference. Because you'll find, and I'm sure this happens on the other side of the aisle, that there are so many people who are just involved to say that they're involved or to hold on to that little slice of power, as I mentioned, instead of actually doing something.
One thing that I find interesting when I look back on 2018 and 2019 and when we ran for office, one thing that I find really interesting is that when we were walking on the street or we were walking around Auburn's campus and we were talking to people one-on-one in a natural and honest way, there were so many little things that people weren't aware of. Like they didn't know that their license didn't have to match their registration in order to cast a ballot. And I think there are a lot of missed opportunities across the board, but specifically within the Democratic Party.
Basically, there are so many ways that Democrats could bridge the gap. And a lot of that is just simply communication. And we could talk all day long about all the things that the Democratic Party in Alabama and beyond could be doing in order to reach young people and to bridge the gap of them knowing an issue and actually showing up to vote. But you're right, that one is one of the main issues I hear over and over and over again with young people. But I want to say I also heard it with my husband, who's military. And when we sort of settled down here in the Huntsville area, he was like, oh, I have to go get my license updated so I can vote. And I was like, no, you don't. You just have to have an address. It doesn't matter where your license is from. So I do think it's really confusing. And I also think you and I both know that much of that is on purpose. People are confused on purpose because then they don't vote.
Yeah. A lot of what I have learned from politics and running for office and things to be aware of came from you. And so I owe you a big thank you because you have made me a more informed person. I know how to research issues or see both sides, and really I know how to tackle an issue because of the lessons that I've learned from you. And one thing that I remember from 2018 that I never thought of before, and it's one of the only things I can pay attention to now, as you alluded to, is there is a messaging problem, there's a communication problem. And I'm going to save what I'm pretty furious about for your podcast. I have a few of them, but one of them that I'm pretty furious about is the messaging issue, because I was scrolling on social media and I came across, and this was about 2 weeks ago, I came across a post from the National Democratic Party, and they made a graphic of all the things that Democrats have done this week. And one of them was all House Democrats voted against X. And I got so mad because I was like, great, you showed up and you did the bare minimum. Like, what are you actually doing? And that post could have been information that told people how to...
My team and I'm the national press secretary for the Seneca Project, and our tagline is "Galvanize Women, Save Democracy." And we often say, "Ain't nobody reading all that." Like they put out these long, they put out these long graphics and long text things, and it's like, "Ain't nobody reading all that." Republicans' messaging is always, "They're going to take your guns and kill your babies," and baby, for the last decade, that's all they've had to say. They don't do anything. They're not putting out legislation that helps the average voter. They don't care about you. They don't care about the working class person. And yet they're going to take your guns and kill your babies. And that's all they ever say.
It's insane.
So Democrats are very bad at like over explaining and talking up here. And the truth of the matter is, and I will say this wholeheartedly, it's because research and data shows that people who align with the Democratic Party are more educated. And when they're more educated, they're talking up here. And I'm so sorry if that hurts your feelings, but there's data to prove it. So Democrats are smarter, and you can kiss my ass if you don't like that. But, so then Democrats talk up here, and then we have this sort of like, well, they think that they're elite. That's a messaging problem. You can't break something down to they're going to take your guns and kill your babies. Then you've got a whole segment of the population who doesn't understand what you're saying or what you're going to do. So we've got a lot of work to do, but also as we slide very quickly into the throes of fascism, I personally am very frustrated with Democrats as a whole for not playing this game how it's being played right now.
Yep.
We're still living in, we're still living in this is how it's supposed to be done. And that's just not how Republicans are playing the game, and it's not how they've been playing for the last decade. And if we don't get on board and fight for real, we're all in for a long, I would say, next 20 years.
What does fighting for real look like to you? Like, what do you think is a missed opportunity that would be equivalent to that of what the Republicans are doing right now?
Well, first and foremost, I think what we saw this week with Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats voting for the continued resolution was the exact opposite of like playing dirty and fighting back. I think when you look at it morally, did they do the right thing? Yes. But is it going to get messaged that way? And are people going to understand that the Democrats are the ones who actually did the right thing? No. Because Chuck Schumer said, if we shut down the government, Donald Trump will take power and close down the government even further and then blame it on Democrats. He's doing that anyway. But what I think Democrats can do, and I'm starting to see, is this idea of these nationwide town halls in districts that are not theirs. I'm loving seeing that. Tim Walz just announced a campaign. Bernie's traveling all over the country. And we know, because when I ran in District 3, Mike Rogers doesn't show up. Republicans, and especially Republicans who have been in office for a really long time, they do not show up for their constituents. And their constituents are being hurt right now. Whether they're veterans or they're people who work for the government, they're getting laid off from their jobs, they're scared. And to not have your representative answer the phone or show up for a town hall is detrimental, even if you are a Republican in a Republican district. So I'm glad to see some of these Democrats going into Republican districts and saying, well, if your representative won't listen to you, I will. I think that is genius.
I have been saying for weeks now that they need to take Jasmine Crockett off of TikTok and put her on a stage, do a Donald Trump style rally in places and have Jasmine Crockett speak, because people will listen. And I think if we learned anything from if I'm being honest, since 2018, is that social media cannot be a sign of how election is going to turn out if you're not
Hmm.
actually boots on the ground in the streets talking to people and making a physical connection with people. Like you can use that as a sign of how something's going to turn out. So I fully agree with what you're saying.
I
And
also I
go
also
ahead.
think, and I don't want to take credit for this because it actually came from an Atlantic article and I don't remember the author of it, but I read an article, it was an op-ed from someone who was saying Democrats need to stop chasing the news, stop chasing everything that comes out every day, stop commenting on everything that comes out every day, and hone in on one message, and that is that Donald Trump and his administration are corrupt. Everything about this administration is corrupt. It is being used for personal gain, for financial gain, for a very few amount of people. And that just needs to be what's playing over and over and over again. And I do agree with that, I think, actually, because the truth of the matter is that the people who are his base, the people who still support him and support this administration, I do think that's one thing that, if drilled home, might sway them in a different
Mm.
direction. And we're going to need that if he plans on running again.
Oh God. One thing that I learned in 2019 when I ran for city council is that the statement that policy at the local level impacts you, I don't want to say the most, but the quickest. You feel the impact of local policy faster than sometimes at the federal level. And
Hmm.
so there is, in my opinion, why one thing that I learned on the campaign and one thing that I tell people is to get involved locally, because what's happening federally at the national level, yes, it's scary, but if you get involved locally, you can mitigate that impact a little bit by making sure that your local government is putting in protections and looking
Hmm.
after people in the way that you're not being looked at the other level. So what I want to know from you is how you're encouraging people to get politically active in their communities. What are some ways that they can do that?
Sure. Well, I think there are a couple of different ways that people can get, quote, politically active. And it looks different for everyone and what their comfort level or time or financial investment level could be. So I'll start with probably the easiest thing to do if you have the financial means, to be honest, is to find an organization that you support or want to see more of and donate to that organization monthly. Your $5 may not seem like a lot, but 30, 30, 45 dollar donations a day can sustain an organization that's doing great work. I think about the Seneca Project, obviously, when I say that, but there are plenty out there. Another thing you can do is donate your time or any source of talent that you have to a local organization that's doing issue based work. So I think I'm on the board of our local Rocket City Pride, and I give my time and energy and talents in a variety of ways there. And then I also think you can show up. You can show up to your local city council meeting. You can show up to have conversations with your school board members. You, as a tax-paying citizen, no matter how old you are, have the right to show up and let those people know your thoughts on what's going on in your community around you. So I would say, financially get involved if you can. If you don't have the time, if you have time, give to an issue-based organization, and definitely be sure you're keeping up with what's going on with like your city council and your city government so that you can be involved and let them know how you feel about what's going on in your local community as well. And last but not least, in case you haven't heard this one before, please find your representative's phone number, put it in your phone, and make it a habit to call them on a regular basis and let them know how you feel about the legislation that they are voting on.
I am down to my last two questions with you, and they're fun questions. I promise. Because
I'm not any fun. I don't want them.
so the second last question is, I want to know what you're looking forward to. Everything's so scary right now.
Mm.
There's a lot to be angry about. We are pretty furious, as you like to say, but I want to know what you're looking forward to.
I would say personally, I'm looking forward to my annual summer vacation with my family. And I think this is great advice for anybody who's looking around and thinking that the world's on fire and like, holy shit, what are we going to do? The truth of the matter is that whether it's your actual family or your chosen family or your friends in your community, sitting down face to face with real people and having actual conversations that are not through the keyboard of your phone or your computer is so important right now. We have to surround ourselves with people who get us and who support us and love us and hear us when we talk about those fears. But for right now, I'm most looking forward to a week long beach vacation with my entire family. It's my favorite part of the year.
I have to agree with your sentiment there because I think I found a lot more joy recently in putting all of my time into this podcast and preparing for it. And I don't think we should be a slave to our work, but really diving into work and figuring out where I can grow and be better. Going outside and working out and getting involved locally. There are all these things that we can do that's not watching those opinion-based cable shows or doom scrolling on social media. And so there's almost a beauty in what I have learned and what I've gained because things are so bad. So I think there is a silver lining to be had there. I'm going to be ending all my episodes with having people call in or have my guests share what they're not wrong about. So I want to ask you what you're not wrong about. So pretty much the hill that you're willing to die on because you're not willing to admit that you're wrong on it. So I want to know, Mallory Hagan, what are you not wrong about?
Well, I think many people will agree with me that we need many, 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 many more women involved in politics and leadership because no offense, but y'all have ruined it all. So time to give it up. And whether that means, PTA, local school board, city council, we need women to step into these roles and get involved, which means that we need people who are willing to support them as they run for those positions. But yeah, that I'm not wrong about that. And I actually saw something this week that said Alabama is the worst place, like 51 out of 50 states, because DC was first, the worst place for women in leadership. So we've got to do something to change that.
I came up with an actual last question. I think you just answered it, but I'm still going to ask it. Mallory Hagan, are you going to run for office again in the state of Alabama? Can we see your name on a ballot anytime soon?
It definitely won't be anytime soon, but I'm never going to say never. I have no idea who I'll be 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And we've got like an 80-year-old president, so I got time.
Mallory, I love you. Thank you.
I love you, Chad. You're not wrong.
And so with that was my first guest. I really hope that you took something away from my conversation with Mallory. I know it was short, but we fit a lot into that time. And I cannot thank her enough for taking the time out of her busy schedule to join us on He's Not Wrong. What a treat it is to have a guest, but it's always that even bigger bonus when it's Mallory. Thank you so much for coming on here with me today. I hope all of you watching at home enjoyed your cup of coffee and the conversation Mallory has. If you have any thoughts, any questions, leave them in the comments on my social media. You can get the handles in the description of this podcast. And don't forget that we release new episodes every single Sunday, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And with that, I'll see you next Sunday.